Welcome to another informational presentation for EDET 620 Educational Technology. This particular presentation addresses some of the specific elements and components of an effective instructional introduction. And this is important because you are being asked to develop a project or an activity in which you use YouTube or other digital video resources to help improve the overall effectiveness of an instructional introduction. And just to remind you that this is part of helping you accomplish the overall course goal, which is to address in very specific ways the question, how can teachers use technology to improve their professional practice? And as previously presented in the course, there are 4 specific areas in which the course addresses strategies designed to help teachers improve their practice in 4 specific areas. One has to do with the use of technology to improve instructional efforts. Another area has to do with the use of technology to improve and support community building efforts for teachers. A third area has to do with the way technology can be used in order to help manage and support various aspects of a teacher's job. And the fourth area has to do with ways in which emerging networked information technologies can be used to help support the professional development efforts of teachers today. This particular project, the YouTube Introduction Project, addresses specific ways in which a teacher might use technology to help improve an aspect of instruction. And again, just a reminder from the previous presentation, instruction can be viewed as a collection of components or strategies designed to help facilitate learning. They represent specific ways in which a learner's environment is arranged to help support learning specific skills, knowledge, or attitudes. And in this particular project, you are going to be focusing on ways in which technology might specifically be used to help define an effective instructional introduction. So I would like to just spend a few moments reviewing with you some information that is presented in the course notes about specific strategies that define effective instructional introductions. And it's important to note that not all introductions include all of these strategies, but this represents a collection of ways in which introductions can be made more effective based on the research associated with specific elements of the beginnings to new learning experiences. The first strategy is a fairly obvious one, and that is that a good introduction really gains the learner's attention. And again, this is very important because research suggests it's very difficult, if not impossible, for learners to acquire new knowledge, skills, or attitudes if they're not attending to the stimuli that are designed to help facilitate changes in their knowledge structures. They need to be gaining attention to the experience. So it's important for a good introduction to gain learner attention. It's also important in a good introduction to communicate the overall purpose or objectives of a learning experience. And I have a couple of pictures here of students, one contemporary and one a little nostalgic, students who are presenting a science fair project. And I included these pictures because they represent a really good example of something that the teachers most likely communicated to the learners about doing a science-related learning experience, and that is communicating specifically that the learners would be developing a project, it would be entering it into a science fair, it would be evaluated by external judges, and most likely that the project would involve a line of investigation that was of personal interest to the students. So communicating the purpose and objectives is a very important part of a good introduction. Another important part of a good introduction has to do with communicating a conceptual big picture and fitting the what is about to be learned into an overall conceptual big picture. I'm using an example of something that I actually used when I was a biology teacher in high school. I had a wall that was covered in the image that you see, and I know it's a little hard to read with some small words and such, but the image reflects one way to organize some of the basic concepts associated with the field of biology. On the outside, you have kind of the one way to organize various concepts from biggest to smallest, and in the middle are represented concepts associated with the scientific method, or how we know what we know about the concepts on the outside of the circle. And one example of a way in which this big picture was used every time a new learning experience was introduced to the learners was, for example, doing an investigation that involved learning about evolution. I could go to the big picture and explain what evolution was with respect to populations interacting with each other in a community, and that those communities were influenced and affected by their environment or the ecosystem. And so I could fit the concept of evolution into this overall big picture. So that's a very effective strategy for setting the stage to new learning experiences for learners, and this is just one example of that. So communicating a conceptual big picture to the learners and helping them fit what they're about to be learned, or what is about to be learned, into an overall big picture is important. Another important strategy has to do with communicating what kind of meaningful, purposeful learning context is being defined within the experience, and to help learners communicate for themselves what their personal goals are within the learning context. So I have a picture of a young student who's aiming a camera. He's involved in something that is associated with his own experiences, capturing images and doing something associated with that. So again, it's important to establish meaningful, purposeful learning contexts. It's also important within those contexts to communicate that the learners have choices that reflect their own personal engagement. Here I have a picture that was represented previously, and it is actually a picture of Homer Hickam, the man who wrote Rocket Boys, that was turned into the movie October Sky. And he's communicating here in this picture his science fair project that had to do with rockets, and that was obviously a choice that his teachers provided in doing a class project where he was responsible for selecting some of the overall topics or content that was going to be addressed. So setting the stage for personal engagement is a very important aspect of an effective introduction. It's also important in an effective introduction to address prerequisite skills. What do the learners already need to know how to do well in order to succeed within the new learning environment? That's another important aspect of a good introduction. Also, it's important for teachers to communicate the usefulness of what the learners are asked to learn how to do. Here I've got a picture of a book that I use in another course I teach on assessment and evaluation. And one of the great things about the book is that it addresses specifically, quote, what teachers need to know. And that's a very thoughtful and very deliberate approach on behalf of the author to ensure that everything that's presented in the book addresses the specific needs of teachers. And so it's important to reflect on the overall usefulness of a learning experience. That's, again, part of an effective introduction. It's also important to communicate the intrinsic and extrinsic rewards that are going to be present within the learning experience for those who successfully negotiate the learning experience. Here I have a picture of a student who's exploring a student art exhibit, and certainly one of the rewards for undertaking an art project in a school might be the rewards that come from displaying your work for other people to enjoy. And that's just a good example of an extrinsic reward for the learning experience. It's also important in a good introduction to explain to the learners what types of support mechanisms are going to be part of the learning experience. And so access to different scaffolds should be clearly communicated within the introduction. And finally, if groups are going to be used within the learning experience, it should be made clear during the introduction what roles the different students are going to have within the groups, what roles the teachers are going to play within the overall learning experience, what roles the different learning resources are going to play, and what tasks are the responsibility of individuals within those groups. So that's another very important aspect of a good and effective instructional introduction. So it's important to consider these different characteristics of an effective introduction. When you enter into this assignment, you're going to be asked to help figure out and explore ways in which you might use YouTube videos to help introduce a new learning experience, and it could be that you find videos that help gain attention, or that help provide a conceptual big picture, or help communicate in some way some of the resources or scaffolding that are going to be available in the learning experience. But it's kind of a fun assignment. It's a very creative one, and you get to repurpose material that's already been created and posted, and it's all done for the purpose of helping you explore some of the different ways in which you might use technology to improve instruction, specifically to improve the effectiveness of an instructional introduction.